The X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. Joel Richardson is my special guest this hour. He is a recognized authority on the subject of Islam. Joel is a best-selling author, human rights activist, and popular speaker. He is the author of Antichrist, Islam's Awaited Messiah, an analysis of Islamic apocalyptic belief, co-author of God's War on Terror, and the co-editor on Why We Left Islam, Former Muslims Speak Out. Joel has lived in the Middle East nations of Egypt, Jordan, Israel, and Palestine territories, and has been deeply involved with both the study of Islam and interfaith dialogue with Muslims for the past 14 years. Joel has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, including The Gordon Liddy Show, The Dennis Miller Show, National Public Radio, and many others. And he's with us tonight here on the X-Zone. And Joel Richardson, welcome to the X-Zone.
Thank you very much for having me on tonight, Rob.
It's my pleasure, Joel. Tell me, Joel, how did you get involved in writing about Islam?
Well, as you mentioned, I've been involved with interfaith dialogue with Muslims on and off, really, for the past 14 years. Mm-hmm. And for any Christians that have been involved in, let's say, having dialogue with Jehovah's Witnesses, they know that there are certain sects and cults and religions that are very much trained to do battle, if you will, with Christians, and Muslims are foremost among those. So when you get involved with having conversations with Muslims, you're going to be challenged on nearly every issue that you can imagine. And as a result, over the years, as I've walked through this season of interfaith dialogue, I've had 7 or 8 different books going at any given time, and I've studied virtually any subject that you can imagine, from the development of the canon of the Bible to early church history to unusual subjects such as Islamic apocalyptic belief. And it was really several years ago that I became heavily interested in what Muslims believe about the end of the world, and virtually read every book available on the subject in English. And in 2004, I began writing my first book, which is called Antichrist, Islam's Awaited Messiah, with the effort to try to make the world more aware of this fairly esoteric subject, but a fascinating subject at that.
What is the Muslim apocalyptic view?
Well, in a very similar way to what Christianity has taught, Muslims believe that at the end of the age there would be the emergence of a handful of very clear apocalyptic signs, and the emergence of a few apocalyptic characters. And Muslims have very similar beliefs to Christians, except what I say is that they have an anti-parallel view. So Islam has essentially taken all of the good guys, mm-hmm. if you will, of the biblical story, and they've made them into the bad guys. And they've taken all of the bad guys and they've turned them around into the good guys. So they have this anti-parallel view. They've taken everything that the Bible refers to in the last days and speaks of as evil, and it refers to that as good, and it refers to everything that the Bible refers to as good, and it makes it out to be evil.
You and I have to take a 2-minute commercial break, Joel. We'll be back on the other side. Joel Richardson is our special guest. His website is www.joels-trumpet.com, JOELS-trumpet.com. My name is Rob McConnell, and this is The X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, and then the show is repeated in its entirety from 2 a.m. until 6 a.m. 1-877-528-8255 is toll-free. My email address is xzone@talkstarradio.com. Joel Richardson and I return on the other side of this 2-minute break as we continue live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine like hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining room can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you're visiting, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, old Florida cuisine at its best. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Joel, is Islam truly a religion of peace, as President Bush and many others claim?
Well, that's an important question. I wish the United States would get clear on it. The irony is that when we have an individual such as Adam Yahya Gadan or Johnny Walker Lind from California who converts to Islam and goes to the mosque and learns about Islam and then follows Islam all the way to Pakistan in order to try to better his practice of Islam, we arrest them as enemy combatants or terrorists. And so the question is, which is it? Is Islam a religion of peace, or are these individuals enemy combatants and terrorists? The United States needs to get this down. The fact of the matter is that Islam is and has been from its very inception, after the pattern of its founder, Muhammad, a violent, militaristic, totalitarian ideology. And it is, in fact, the antithesis of a religion of peace.
Now, how important is the subject of the end times within Islam?
Well, there's a famous tradition with it.
Do we still have Joel there? Stephanie, is Joel there? Okay, do you want to get him back up, please? All right, we just had a technical glitch. We're going to be getting Joel Richardson back on. Joel is a recognized authority on the subject of Islam. Joel is the best-selling author, human rights activist, and popular speaker. He is the author of Antichrist, Islam's Awaited Messiah, the analysis of Islamic apocalyptic belief, co-author of God's War on Terror, and the co-editor of Why We Left Islam, Former Muslims Speak Out. And he's going to be back with me momentarily. Okay, he's back with us. Hi, Joel.
Sorry about that, Rob. I've been having trouble lately here. Yeah, within Islam, belief in the end times is an essential belief. Literally, the Quran says you must believe in Allah and His Prophet and in the last day, and then in the angels and in the final judgment. So it literally mentions the belief in the last day immediately after, you must believe in Allah and His Prophet. It is an indispensable aspect of Islam. Christianity is belief in the end times has almost become an optional doctrine. Within Islam, it is primary.
Now, what are some of the basic beliefs that Muslims believe about the end of the world?
Okay. Well, let me get a little bit more specific. I was beginning to touch on it before the break. To try to contextualize it, within the Bible, the basic template for the end times is that there will be an individual known as the Antichrist, and he will be assisted by someone known as the false prophet. And these two individuals will gather a coalition of nations from throughout the world, and they will take this coalition, and as military leaders, they will attack the nation of Israel. They will establish their rule over the world from the Temple Mount. They will slaughter Jews. Eventually, the Antichrist himself will demand to be worshipped. The false prophet will assist him in this process, and they will declare essentially a one-world religion. Now, eventually, according to the Bible, Jesus himself will return from heaven to defeat these individuals, and he will return as a defender against the aggressors. Now, within the Islamic template, you have a character first and foremost known as Imam al-Mahdi. Now, some of you may have heard the president of Iran discussing Imam al-Mahdi. This is the primary Islamic Messiah figure. And he will be assisted, according to Islam, by an individual known as Isa al-Masih. That's Jesus the Messiah. He will be the assistant to the Mahdi. These individuals will raise up a coalition of Islamic nations. They will attack Israel. They will slaughter Jews. They will establish the Islamic Caliphate, or the Caliphate, from the Temple Mount. They will declare that Islam is the only religion that can be practiced throughout the earth. And then they will, as I mentioned, slaughter Jews and literally eliminate Jews, the final Holocaust. The famous Islamic tradition that is cited daily in the Palestinian mosques and really throughout the Islamic world. It was just this week removed from the University of Southern California website, is that the day of resurrection will not come until the Muslims fight against the Jews and kill them, until there are only a few Jews left hiding behind a tree or a rock, and the tree or the rock will cry out and say, "Oh, faithful Muslim, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him." And this will be carried out by the Islamic al-Mahdi and as who they believe to be Jesus Christ. Then, according to Islam, the Antichrist, who they refer to as Ad-Dajjal, will come, and he will be followed by Jews, and of course he will be defeated by Imam al-Mahdi and by this individual known as Isa al-Masih. So you can see how Islam has an identical story to what the Bible teaches, except it's completely twisted it on its head.
I was wondering if you could tell us about what the Muslims believe about the mark of the beast.
Well, this is another very interesting anti-parallel, because the Bible teaches that in the last days that all people throughout the world will be forced to accept a badge of identification, a mark, and there's been all sorts of discussion and debate about this, on their forehead or on their right arm. And this will be a mark that will identify them with the final end-time Antichrist religion. Now, what Muslims have done is they've borrowed and stolen from various Christian and Jewish traditions, and they formed their own apocalyptic traditions. And so when Muslims read about the beast in the book of Revelation, they don't realize that it's figurative, and the beast is actually referring to an empire. So Muslims believe that at the end of the age, a literal beast will emerge out of the sands of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and this beast will be, surprise, surprise, he will be a good beast. And this beast will mark the foreheads of all true Muslims. He will have this sort of magic wand, and he will mark the foreheads of all true Muslims. So Muslims literally, with regard to the end times, are hoping and praying that they will be considered worthy to receive the mark of the beast.
Everything is turned right around.
Yep, exactly. And when you take that a step further,
yes,
what I articulate with Walid Shobat, Walid is a former Palestinian terrorist, in the book God's War on Terror, what we articulate, or what we argue, is that when the Bible speaks in Revelation 13:17 of the emergence of the beast in the end times, that it's speaking of an empire, and specifically the revival of the Islamic empire. After Muhammad died, his successors, the caliphs, went on to establish an Islamic empire, and it's existed in various forms in the Umayyad and the Abbasid, and eventually the Ottoman caliphates. And that this empire in 1924 was essentially broken up by the colonizing European powers, and the office of the caliph was abolished by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk in Turkey. And what we argue is that in the last days, this empire will revive, and it will reform throughout the Middle East. And in fact, we're seeing that very thing taking place today, and that we will eventually see the reestablishment of the caliphate. So this is what we believe is the beast, if you will. It is this being that's described, as this beast with 7 heads and 10 horns and so forth. And so, interestingly enough, again, Islamic tradition teaches that the beast would emerge from where? It is a beast that would emerge from out of the earth, from Mecca. So, in the Bible, again, I believe that the Bible teaches that the last days empire would literally emerge out of Arabia, out of Mecca, out of the womb of Arabia, from where Islam burst forth. You would eventually have the bursting forth onto the earth of this Islamic beast empire. And likewise, Islam teaches that the beast would emerge out of Mecca to mark the heads of all of the true Muslims.
There are so many similarities, and yet there are so many differences. And where did all this come from?
Well, Rob, I'm not sure about you, but when I look at this, to me, when I look at the various design throughout the earth, I look at all of the various laws of science, I see the clear hand of a designer. I see intelligent design.
Yes.
And when I look at the multiple parallels, I say, this is more than mere coincidence. This is more than mere coincidence. And really, for someone who does believe in the Bible, the only option that one is left with is that there was the hand of an intelligent being, an intelligent evil being, in the history and the development of Islam. And that being can be none other than Satan, than Lucifer. There are various human reasons that Christians were converting to Islam back and forth, and traditions were borrowed, but the end result is that Muslims throughout the world today have been set up. They have a 1,400-year-old prophetic tradition that teaches them to welcome the Antichrist when he comes with open arms, as if he is the Messiah, as if he is their Savior.
Joel, stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Joel Richardson is our special guest. www.joels-trumpet.com. Joel and I will be back on the other side of the news as the X-Zone continues right here on the Talkstar Radio Network from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, I am here with you, the members of the X-Zone Nation. Our websites, www.xzoneradio.com, xzonetv.com, and xzoneipod.com. We'll be back after the news. Don't go away.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Joel Richardson is our special guest. His website is joels-trumpet.com. And Joel, is there any way that we can all live in harmony without this constant threat of war, or the constant threat of the tension that we're living with these days, and what's going on in the Middle East? Is there any way that we can ascertain global peace?
Well, absolutely. The day will come, as I mentioned, when Jesus himself will return from heaven, and he will destroy those who are bound and determined not to have peace. Unfortunately, there is evil in the world. Mm-hmm. And when you have 1.5 billion individuals who have been born into a tradition which teaches them that they cannot have utopia, they cannot have Islamic paradise until, as I mentioned earlier, until the Jews are killed, until the final Holocaust is completed. How can we expect the nation of Israel to sit down at the table with individuals like this who are determined to kill them and treat them as peace partners? It's really unfair of President Bush and Condoleezza Rice to go over and expect the Israelis to accept a peace with a people, 70% of which want to see them destroyed. Now, as you mentioned earlier, I've lived in the Middle East, and
yes.
A good percentage of the Israelis are members of the Labor Party. They're individuals that want nothing more but to have a place somewhere in the world where they can raise their children without fear of being killed simply because they're Jews. And for that reason, the Bible gives us the glad tidings that the day will come when Jesus himself will return, and he will give the nation of Israel peace with her surrounding nations, the surrounding neighbors, but the peace will come after victory. The peace will come after Jesus himself specifically destroys the nations that are bound and determined to destroy Israel. And unfortunately, until then, we won't have peace.
What was it like living over there?
Well, it depends where you are. The nation of Israel itself is a very, very, very liberal nation. The majority of Israelis are not religious. In certain places, it's not much different than living in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And definitely a very, very loose society. On the other hand, when you cross the border from Israel into Egypt, it's similar to crossing from, San Diego into Baja, Mexico. You've entered into a completely different world. And now let me mention, I've obviously been a little bit hard on the Islamic tradition. I love Muslim people. Arabic culture is an incredibly hospitable culture. People will welcome you into their homes to sit down, to drink tea, to chat. And there is certainly a majority of Muslims who are, and I'm not going to say moderate Muslims, I'm going to say they're liberal Muslims. Although they are raised under Islam, they choose to follow their conscience as opposed to following the example of Muhammad, who himself was a very violent individual, a very narcissistic, controlling individual, filled with intolerance and hatred. And so there are certainly many Muslims that are liberal Muslims who do not follow strictly the violent tenets of Islam and so forth. And I tend to really, really love that culture. I mean, I fit in very well with it. Unfortunately, there are those who do follow Islam, the fundamentalists who do follow the Quran and the example of Muhammad, and they make it very difficult. When I was in the city of Hurghada, which is called Hurghada in English, it's Kurdaka in Arabic, I walked up to the scene of what was the first uprising of Al-Ikhwan, the Egyptian Brotherhood, and that night there were 6 people that had been murdered about probably a minute before I walked into the scene, and there were a few German tourists and a few Egyptian locals that had been murdered. This type of thing now is happening quite frequently in Egypt, and unfortunately my mother's warnings, you can't go over there, it's dangerous, was proven true, but the truth being you're probably less safe in Chicago today than you are in many sections of the Middle East, but it's certainly a different world, certainly a very different world than what we're used to over here.
What are some of the proofs, Joel, that we are truly living in the end times?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Bible makes it very clear that in the last days there would be an empire that would reemerge from the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And the Bible gives us very specific names and locations of the nations that would be part of this last days empire. Specifically, is the book of Ezekiel 38:39, mentions that we would see the emergence of the empire led by Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Libya, Sudan, that these nations would begin to form a coalition, and then it says, and many nations with you. And today we are literally seeing the emergence of this coalition of nations, this unification of the radical nations of Iran, Syria, Lebanon. Political commentators refer to this as the Shia Crescent. We've recently seen the election of the AKP party in Turkey, who are Islamists. Now, Turkey is really the longest-lasting secular nation in the Middle East. As I mentioned, since 1924, Turkey has been a largely secular Islamic nation. Recently, we saw the Islamists take over, and under the administration of Prime Minister Erdogan and President Gül, we are seeing the creeping Islamization of one of the more secular nations in the Middle East. And Turkey is taking a leadership role in all of these things. And we're also seeing the move toward what the Bible refers to as the covenant of death. It's a 7-year peace treaty that it says the nation of Israel would enter into with the surrounding nations, and it would be a peace treaty that would eventually be broken. Now, I mentioned some of the parallels and the anti-parallels earlier between Islamic apocalyptic belief and what the Bible teaches. The Antichrist, according to the Bible, would enter into this 7-year peace treaty with Israel, and then in Islamic tradition, the Islamic Mahdi would also specifically rule for a period of 7 years. So the Islamic Messiah figure would reign for 7 years, and he would enter into a covenant with Israel specifically during that time, and this covenant would be mediated with an individual who they say would be a Levite, a priest. And so there again you have another very strikingly clear parallel. So as we're seeing in the Middle East, we're seeing the push now, even under the Bush administration, for a peace treaty with between Israel and the surrounding nations. We're seeing the beginning of the emergence of this revived Islamic Caliphate. We're seeing all of the signs that the Bible says would be present in the last days. We're seeing them emerge right before our eyes right now in the Middle East.
Joel Richardson's our guest this hour, Exonation. His website is www.joels-trumpet.com. When you're out talking about your books, Joel, and you're meeting people around the world, what is the general feeling about people when they're talking to you about Islam? And are people necessarily totally negative towards Islam, or are they just wondering why there's so much hatred, so much negativity.
Well, as you know, Rob, the ideas of religious pluralism really dominate the Western mindset, and so many in the United States and in the West would just love to believe the old adage that all paths lead to the same place, and that all religions at their core are essentially good, and all religions are essentially from God, and they all share these common traits. But they failed to take into consideration that perhaps 1,400 years ago in the Middle East, that someone like a David Koresh or like a Jim Jones rose up, a cult leader, a narcissist at the core, and rather than being wiped out in the jungles of Guyana, or rather than being, murdered by the American government, Muhammad succeeded and his religion spread. And unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, there is evil in the world. And so while few people in the West really want to face up to the fact that Islam at its core is an intolerant, militaristic, totalitarian ideology, they don't want to admit that a world religion could be at its very core an evil oppressive force in the earth. They don't want to face that fact. They'd rather say Islam is a religion of peace that's been hijacked by radicals. The fact of the matter is that anyone who truly studies the source text of Islam, who truly studies the life and example of Muhammad, will have nothing other than to admit the fact that it is an evil religion. Let me just give you another few examples.
Sure.
The Bible says that the Antichrist, in the book of Daniel, would show no regard for the desire of women. And that's been debated as far as what that means. But a lot of people say it simply means that the Antichrist would show no regard for women's rights, for the desires of women. Now, it was Muhammad himself who, in his 50s, married a 6-year-old girl and then consummated that relationship just before her 9th birthday when he was in his mid-50s. It was Muhammad himself who claimed to have a vision of hell, and he declared that the majority of the inhabitants of hell were women. It was Muhammad himself who, in discussing the Islamic law, that in court the testimony of a woman is only half as good as a man, and that you need 2 women to equal the testimony of 1 man. And Muhammad said, well, that is because women are deficient in intelligence to men. So when you have this individual that Muslims look to literally as the role model for all of humanity, as the perfect man, Islam is undeniably the premier force in terms of oppressing women and violating women's rights throughout the earth today. And there is no one, whether they're the most, given over to religious pluralism and determined to believe that all religions are good. There is no one who will concede to the notion that that is good in any way, shape, or form. Just in Pakistan, just this past week, a 9-year-old girl who was married to a man in his 40s desired to be divorced. As a result, her family killed her because she was bringing shame to the family. A 9-year-old girl married to a 40-year-old man. That is evil, and that is something that whether we're extremely conservative or extremely liberal, we cannot tolerate. Here in the United States, we value these principles of openness and tolerance, and these are wonderful principles that made this nation a great nation. But unfortunately, we've literally made a national idol to this concept of tolerance. And we need to take the principles of human rights, civil liberties, freedoms, and we need to always prioritize those above tolerance. Unfortunately, Islam forces us to choose between those two, because within Islam, you cannot have both. You cannot tolerate Islam, which is at its very core, a freedom-destroying, human rights-violating ideology. And all one really needs to do is look to any nation throughout the earth that attempts to practice Islamic law, whether it be Saudi Arabia or Iran or Afghanistan under the Taliban, and you will see some of the most gross violations of human rights, women's rights, children's rights, non-Muslim rights, and Muslims as well, of any nation throughout the world. Muslims are always the first victims of Islam. And so as we discuss these things, I'll be accused of intolerance and hatred and that sort of thing. Not at all. Not at all. If I love someone, I'm going to tell them the truth, and I'm going to stand up for the Muslim that's oppressed, as well as the non-Muslim that's oppressed. And it's a dark, dark picture. But as I said, if one believes in the Bible, that the day will come when all of these things will be corrected and all of these things will be righted, and indeed the world will live in peace in the near days to come.
Joel, stand by. We've got to take our final break. Joel Richardson is our guest. www.joels-trumpet.com. When we come back, we'll take a look at who's going to be with us tomorrow night here on the X Zone, live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
19th Sergeant Central. 19th Sergeant, check. Officers on the scene.
Hi, I'm Larry Lawson, host of Paranormal Stakeout. With over 36 years in law enforcement, I have learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, UFOs, and extraterrestrials, how we gather the evidence, preserve that evidence, and present it to a jury of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Join me, Larry Lawson, every week on Paranormal Stakeout when, along with my guests, we'll take a journey to prove with indisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Go to xzbn.net for the broadcast schedule and check me out at paranormalstakeout.com.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A soul balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today. www.soulbalancing.world.
Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking all our guests tonight. And let me see, Pastor Harry, Lisa Lindley, Ellie Marzulli, and our guest this hour, Joel Richardson. On tomorrow night's show, we're going to be talking to the sorceress of the Himalayas. We're going to be speaking to Dr. Harold Katz about the connection between gun disease and cancer. Michael Horn joins us. He is the North American representative for the Billy Meyer Group. And Mitch Batros with Earth Changes Update. Joel Richardson is our guest this hour, www.joels-trumpet.com. And Joel, the younger people in the Islamic Muslim community, are they becoming more liberal, or are they still holding on to the old ways and continuing within the Muslim religion?
Well, it depends where you are. In Iran, there's certainly the liberalization of a lot of the youth, but at the same side, in nations like Egypt today, we're seeing a revival of Islamic extremism. There's a lot of interesting trends throughout the Islamic world. One of the trends certainly worth mentioning is that there are many, many Muslims, really unprecedented in history in terms of the numbers of Muslims that are converting to Christianity. And one of the overriding reasons that many Muslims are coming to faith in Christ is due to supernatural dreams and visions. I was just speaking with someone on my blog, or they made mention that just this past week a man strolled up to their church and said, "Where are the Iranians meeting? I just had a dream of a man in a white robe with pierced hands who told me that he is truly God, he is truly the Messiah, and he told me to come to this church." Missionary accounts throughout the Muslim world are sharing stories in an identical fashion. Muslims are having supernatural dreams and visions of a man in a white robe who claims to be Jesus Christ, who is leading them to supernaturally convert to Christianity. It's a documentable phenomenon that's taking place, but unfortunately there are as well many Muslims, young Muslims, that are being radicalized. And obviously we could get into the effects of the war on terror and all that's taking place, but it's a pretty wild time. The 1960s throughout the Middle East, I guess.
Joel, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to talking to you again here in the X Zone.
Hey, you bet. Thanks for having me on, Rob.
Take care, sir. Joel Richardson, www.joels-trumpet.com. Well, that's it for tonight, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking each and every one of you for joining us tonight here on the X Zone. After all, this is truly a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. To my producer, the one and only Miss Stephanie, thank you, Steffi, for keeping us up on those 4 big satellites in the sky, Galaxy 4R, Telstar 7, Aglia 2, and on G3. To my wife and senior producer, the lovely Laura Rogers, thank you, sweetheart. And Exo Nation, we're going to be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross this time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Once again, on tomorrow night's show, we're going to be speaking to the sorceress of the Himalayas. Dr. Harold Katz is going to talk to us about the connection between gum disease and cancer. Michael Horn from the Billy Meyer Group, he is the North American representative for Billy Meyer. And Mitch Batros with Earth Changes Update. So until tomorrow night, if you have a child at home, give them a hug, give them a kiss. Tell them they are loved because they are truly our richest resource. And always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart.